I'm the wicked supporting character. But I've given up. What can you do when your husband gives you 5 million a month but never comes home and loves another woman? Him not coming home is nothing. I'd be willing to guard his grave and polish the tombstone until it shines if that's what he asked. Welcome to the Hee Hee Story channel. Don't forget to subscribe to the Hee Hee Story channel. Story begins. Every year, someone transmigrates into a novel. And this year, it's my turn. I've transmigrated into a cheesy romance novel titled The Possessive CEO's Sick Obsession. The male lead is Alston Whiffen, the apex predator of all domineering CEOs, the king of ATM machines. He has an unattainable love, a white moonlight, who, unfortunately, has married someone else. The story is as melodramatic as it gets. Back in college, Alston pretended to be poor to find a true love who wasn't after his money. And that's when he met the heroine, Florence Tomlin. She pursued him relentlessly and finally captured the heart of the high and mighty Alston Whiffen. But life is never so simple. Florence's father fell gravely ill and desperately needed money. Tearfully, she broke up with Alston and married a rich second-generation heir who had loved her for years. Heartbroken, Alston went numb. Under his family's arrangements, he married the supporting character, Hannah Alliston, that's me. He was so unwilling that they didn't even have a wedding ceremony. Later, it was revealed that the poor boy from before was none other than the eldest son of the Whiffen family. As for the rich second-generation heir who married Florence, he turned out to be a terrible partner, constantly abusing her. Alston, still not over Florence, couldn't bear to see her suffer. He divorced me, Hannah, and forcibly took Florence back, defying his family. Florence, guilt-ridden for leaving Alston, refused to be with him again. The two were tangled in a bittersweet mess, but in the end, they found happiness together. And me? I'm the discarded tool in this drama. Hannah Alliston. Heh. My role has no real screen time. I just sit back, count the zeros in my bank account, and wait for the divorce settlement. Young and already on my way to becoming a wealthy lady. Life's good, and I see a bright future ahead filled with young devoted men eager for my attention. Can't wait. Madam, the young master is back. Aunt Mary knocked on my door. I leaped out of bed. The eldest Whiffen, missing for 3 months, had finally returned. Downstairs, Alston Whiffen's suit was buttoned all the way to the top, adding an air of cold restraint. Broad shoulders, a narrow waist, the golden ratio of a model. No doubt, his looks were unparalleled, as if sculpted by the gods. A true male lead straight out of a domineering CEO novel. His character setup is really something. Since the day we got our marriage license, I hadn't seen him even once in these 3 months. With such a prime specimen before me, I swallowed unconsciously. Beauty is fleeting after all. I've got to stay focused. My good days are still ahead. Mother wants us to come home for dinner tonight. Short and to the point. After speaking, he sat on the sofa, closed his eyes, and made it clear he didn't want to waste another word on me. Fine. I'm just here working. I'll play along with a smile, no matter how cold he is. I'll get ready right away. I turned and headed upstairs to change. 10 minutes later, I was back downstairs, dressed and prepared. I'm ready. Let's go. Alston seemed a bit surprised at how fast I moved, but he kept his face impassive as he walked out the door. I didn't mind at all. Getting upset would only slow down my savings plan. A true worker has no emotions. Alston was already in the car when I decided to sit in the back. After all, CEOs are notorious for their quirks. Whether it's extreme cleanliness or a fear of women, best not to invade his space. Just as I was congratulating myself on my wise decision, I heard him say, "Sit in the front." Alston's brow furrowed as he spoke. His voice as cold as ever. Ha! No questions asked. I quickly moved to the passenger seat. 5 million a month. Act like a loving couple in front of the elders. Don't forget. Forget? How could I? No worries, boss. Of course, boss. Mission accepted. Alston glanced at me after I called him boss. His expression indifferent. He said nothing more. The rest of the ride was in silence, but the awkwardness was suffocating me. When we arrived at the Whiffen family estate, Alston's mother, Madame Sophie, was already waiting at the door. As soon as the car stopped, I stepped forward like a professional, linking arms with Alston. Time to start the performance. Honey, let's go. Alston stiffened at my touch. I could feel the muscles under his suit tense up instantly. Was it my calling him honey? Or the fact that I was holding on to him that made him so uncomfortable? But Madame Sophie was watching us. Boss, is this level of acting acceptable? I smiled sweetly at Madame Sophie while whispering to Alston. He gave a brief nod, leading me inside. Hannah, you're back. Madame Sophie warmly took my hand. Though Alston didn't like me, his parents and grandfather treated me exceptionally well. Years ago, Alston's grandfather was helped by my family, and the two families had been close ever since. When Madame Sophie was pregnant with Alston, our families arranged for us to be engaged. But after the Whiffins' business expanded and they moved to Sea City, we saw less of each other. Recently, the original Hannah's parents passed away in a car accident, and the Whiffins took her in, pushing Alston to marry her. The day before the marriage certificate was signed, I showed up in her place. Hannah, welcome back. Alston's father and grandfather greeted me warmly as well. Dinner was a harmonious affair. Honey, have some ribs. I dutifully placed a piece of meat in Alston's bowl. He stared at the ribs, completely unfazed, then shoved them aside along with the rice near them. His cleanliness habits were truly something to behold. Suddenly, Alston's phone rang. The entire table fell silent, but I calmly continued eating. Of course, it had to be the heroine. Sure enough, after a few moments, Alston frowned and excused himself from the table with a simple, "I have to go." Alston Whiffin, stop right there. His father slammed his chopsticks down on the table. Hannah is still here. Alston paused for a moment. I'll have Uncle Ben drive you home later, he said before briskly walking out. I gently set my utensils down. Father, mother, it's okay. Alston's work is important. Let him go handle his business. Madame Sophie gave me an apologetic look. I'm sorry, Hannah. I'll make sure to scold him later for neglecting his family. I thought Madame Sophie was just being polite, but little did I know, Alston really did get a 2-hour scolding. After dinner, Uncle Ben drove me home, and we passed by the mall. I could barely contain my excitement. I'd been unhappy with the original Hannah's wardrobe for a while now. Bright, striking features, yet dressed in the most boring, bland clothes. That simply won't do. When a rich lady goes shopping, price tags don't exist. I returned home with my arms full of shopping bags, feeling triumphant. It was nearly 10 p.m. by the time I settled in. Barely 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Madam. It was Alston's assistant, Leo Hill. Leo, what's up? I asked absent-mindedly, lounging on the couch with a face mask on, half watching a show. Mr. Alston's had too much to drink with some business partners. Can you come open the door? What? Business partners? Wasn't he supposed to be meeting the heroine? I pulled off my headphones just in time to hear loud knocking at the door. Aunt Mary had taken the day off for an emergency back home, so it was just me. I hadn't heard the door earlier because my headphones were too loud. I realized with a start, if Alston Whiffin was back from his trip, did that mean he'd be staying home now? Nah, that couldn't be. What CEO doesn't have multiple houses? Shrugging, I slowly made my way to the door. Leaning on Leo's shoulder, Alston looked like he was out cold, towering almost a head taller than Leo despite his 6-foot frame. He was completely knocked out. I thanked Leo and took over. Heavy. It felt like I was lugging a small elephant into the house. Alston's warm breath brushed against my ear as he swayed. His head tilted to one side. I dumped him unceremoniously onto the couch, rubbing my ear that had turned red from the heat. It tickled. For someone who'd had too much to drink, Alston was remarkably quiet. Now I had a dilemma. There was only one bed in the master bedroom. Mine and Alston's things were already there. Aunt Mary was always here, acting as Madame Sophie's spy, so I had no choice but to sleep there. I didn't expect to face the situation so soon. Should I let him sleep on the couch? He wouldn't know the difference, being this drunk. But as I looked at his tall, muscular frame awkwardly crammed onto the small sofa, I couldn't help but feel a little sorry for him. Oh well, I'm too kind for my own good. Resigning myself to my fate, I hauled Alston back up and headed toward the bedroom. Those few steps felt like a marathon. When I finally reached the bed and let go, I collapsed on top of him. The strong scent of alcohol filled my head, making me dizzy. Alston frowned in discomfort, but as my hands brushed against his firm muscles, I couldn't help but notice. Yep, he's definitely got an 8-pack. Reluctantly, I pried myself away and crouched beside the bed, taking in the sight of this perfect specimen. It's a shame, really. A dish this fine, and I can only look, not touch. From the heroine's perspective, Alston Whiffen is absolutely top tier. But alas, I'm just the villainess. And then, ugh. Alston Whiffen suddenly opened his bleary eyes, and without warning, leaned over the side of the bed, vomiting violently. Oh my God. Is this karma for sneaking glances at the male lead? Otherwise, why would I be drenched head to toe in his disgusting sour vomit? I shoved Alston's handsome face away with all my might and ran screaming to the bathroom. Ah, I'm filthy. Wah! It took 3 washes before I emerged from the bathroom, still fuming. Looking at the mess on the floor, I felt a strong urge to murder Alston Whiffen. I clenched my fists again and again. Calm down. Think of the 5 million. Breathe in, breathe out. By the time I had scrubbed the floor clean, it was almost 2 a.m. And I still had one more mess to deal with. The man whose clothes were now covered in vomit. After wiping my face and hands, I hesitantly unbuttoned Alston's shirt and peeled off the soiled fabric. Tears of frustration welled up as I worked. Finally, I threw a blanket over him, ran downstairs, grabbed my little blanket, and fanned myself to calm down. Honestly, looking at those vomit-covered clothes, no amount of muscles could make me overlook the mess. That night, however, Alston Whiffen's abs haunted my dreams. I even dreamed he turned into a giant muscle-bound monster, chasing me all over the place. In the morning, Alston was awakened by the sunlight streaming through the windows, his nose catching a faint, unfamiliar yet comforting scent. He glanced at the garbage bin, where his vomit-soaked clothes lay, and vaguely recalled what had happened the night before. As he came downstairs, I was already awake, alert from a night of being chased in my dreams. Even the slightest sound had me jumping up. Seeing me curled up on the sofa, Alston's cold, indifferent eyes softened ever so slightly. About last night? Thanks, Alston said softly, clearing his throat. And I didn't mean to, he added, his ears turning a little red, his brow furrowing in discomfort. He seemed genuinely sorry for puking all over me, and this morning he was a bit less frosty than usual, unlike the aloof man who usually ignored me. No big deal, I yawned, ruffling my hair as I headed toward the kitchen. 4-5 million a month. I can handle anything. But then, the sound of a stomach growling interrupted the silence. I looked up, surprised. Alston's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed, quickly turning to go back upstairs. If it weren't for the slight hurry in his step, you might think he was still his usual composed self. Wait, CEOs get flustered too? An idea sparked in my mind. Was this my chance to make some extra cash? I quickly tied my hair back and rushed into the kitchen. By the time Alston came back down, he was fully dressed, his suit neatly buttoned to the very last button, and not a hair out of place. His usual air of detachment had returned. I placed a steaming bowl of noodles on the table. Boss, how about some breakfast before you go? Alston ate with impeccable manners. No talking while eating, slow and methodical, but efficient. As I watched him, an idea began forming in my mind. If the boss is in a good mood, maybe. Why are you staring at me? After who knows how many times I'd been caught staring, Alston finally spoke. Boss, that mushroom soup you just had. 5,000 per bowl. Cash or card? Alston choked, coughing violently. I quickly handed him a glass of water. Outside, his assistant Leo had arrived to pick him up. Mr. Alston. Wiping his mouth, Alston stood up and left, draping his jacket over his arm. But I swear, I heard him mutter. Transfer. So generous? If I'd known, I would have charged 10,000. I sighed, looking at the empty bowl. Mr. Alston, breakfast is in the front seat, Leo called from outside. There was a brief pause before Alston replied. His voice as indifferent as ever. I've already eaten. And with that, the sound of his voice faded as he left. Later that afternoon, Leo called again. Madam, Mr. Whiffen has a charity gala tonight. He requests that Mrs. Whiffen accompany him. Leo's tone was both professional and respectful. Great. So much for my beauty spa plan. Work never ends. According to the original plot, the heroine and her abusive rich husband would also be attending the event tonight. The heroine had her eye on a $70 million diamond necklace, but her husband wouldn't buy it for her. Alston, on the other hand, would swoop in, buy it, and mock the abusive husband in front of everyone. A front row seat to the drama? I couldn't wait. At precisely 7 p.m., Alston returned to pick me up. I was so busy getting dressed and doing my makeup that I hadn't even had time to eat dinner. I packed a simple fruit salad to take with me and even made an extra portion for Alston. Might as well offer him a little something for breakfast's service. It wouldn't hurt to share, after all. Eating alone might be awkward. When I opened the car door, Alston was still dressed in the same flawless suit from this morning. Not a single wrinkle in sight. He was leaning back, eyes closed, massaging his temples, half of his face cast in the shadow. Want some fruit? I brought you a bowl, I offered, holding out the glass container of neatly prepared fruit. How did Madam know Mr. Alston didn't have time to eat dinner? Leo asked from the driver's seat, sounding genuinely surprised. I glanced at Alston, workaholic to the core, skipping meals for the sake of a deal. No surprise there. Alston opened his eyes briefly, glanced at the fruit, but didn't reach for it. For once, his tone lacked its usual coldness. Still 5,000? I was shocked that Alston was joking. This guy had a sense of humor after all. I couldn't help but laugh. No charge. Consider it a complimentary service for breakfast. For the first time, the tight line of Alston's lips relaxed slightly, hinting at a smile. Wow, a rare sight indeed. Outside the venue, the press was out in full force, swarming around us like vultures. But I calmly linked arms with Alston, smiling for the cameras. Inside, Alston's parents, along with Madame Sophie, were already present. Hannah! Madame Sophie beamed when she saw me with Alston, her face full of satisfaction. At least this rascal has some sense, bringing his wife with him. She teased with a chuckle. Alston coughed lightly, rubbing his nose awkwardly. No worries, boss. I've got this. Mother, Alston has always been good to me, I said sweetly, leaning into his arm, flashing a smile. Alston's muscles stiffened under his suit again, but I could only sigh internally. Sorry, boss, you'll just have to endure it. Madame Sophie gave us a knowing look and smiled. If you see anything you like, just tell Alston. He'll buy it for you, she said with a playful wink before leaving us to mingle with the other wealthy ladies. I just wanted to sit in a quiet corner and wait for the auction to start. Boss, I'll be over there if you need me. Wait. Stay with me to meet some friends, Alston said casually, leading me over to a group of Cecity's elite second-generation heirs. There were 3 or 4 men, each once known as Cecity's most eligible bachelors. Now they were either running their family businesses or, like Alston, had built their own empires, dragons among men. Alston! The suited men greeted him warmly, and the chill in Alston's demeanor melted just a little. Sister-in-law! It's great to finally meet you, they said one after another, surprisingly friendly. I was a bit shocked. They all knew Alston wasn't in love with me, yet they treated me with such respect. Alston introduced each of them to me in a low voice, and I greeted them all with a smile. So these were Alston's friends, domineering CEOs hanging out with other domineering CEOs. Each one more impressive than the last, they were undoubtedly the rising stars of the financial world. Ladies and gentlemen, the auction will begin shortly. Sister-in-law, make sure not to spare Alston's wallet tonight, Colin Channing joked, winking. Elliot Drakes joined in. Yeah, spend all you want. The group laughed, the atmosphere light and relaxed, and I found myself smiling back. Sure thing. I'll max out his card. I teased. Alston raised an eyebrow and glanced at me, a hint of amusement in his eyes. The auction officially began, but I was busy scanning the room for the heroine. In the original storyline, she and her abusive husband were supposed to be seated next to us. But now, sitting next to us were the CEO of Yulong Jewelry and his wife. What was going on? I was really looking forward to seeing Alston tear into the abusive husband. Our next item is a necklace from the Countess of Europe. The starting bid is 30 million. I sat up straight, my eyes sparkling in anticipation. Although they weren't sitting near us, the heroine was still supposed to bid on this necklace, right? In the story, the price went up to 45 million before her husband refused to let her continue bidding. That's when Alston swooped in. Do you like it? Alston Whiffen asked softly, his deep voice trailing off with an upward inflection. The diamond necklace sparkled brilliantly. Who wouldn't love it? But sorry, I'm here for the drama, not the jewelry. It's nice, I replied nonchalantly. 35 million, a woman's voice echoed. Here we go. I looked around, eager to finally see the heroine. My first time laying eyes on her. Wait. Is this the heroine? She seems older? It wasn't the heroine at all but an elderly noblewoman holding up her bidding paddle. 40 million. Alston calmly raised his paddle, his expression steady. 55 million, came another voice. I glanced over, only to see a man holding hands with another younger man. Wait, where's the heroine and her abusive husband? More bids followed, but none from the original characters I expected. 65 million. 80 million, a wealthy businessman called out, his bid far exceeding the necklace's actual worth. 80 million, going once. 100 million. The room fell silent, gasps of shock rippling through the crowd. 100 million? What kind of fool would spend that much on this necklace? Wait. That voice sounded familiar. I slowly turned my head to see Alston Whiffen, calmly holding his paddle in the air. Thanks for the invitation. My brain had just one thought. Big spender. Of course, it made sense for Alston to do this for the heroine. After all, who hasn't made reckless choices in the name of love? After the auction ended, the staff delivered the necklace in a delicate box. The moment it was opened, the brilliance of the diamonds nearly blinded me. Alston glanced at my reaction, his lips twitching slightly. Then, without a word, he signaled for the box to be placed in front of me. I blinked in confusion. It's for you, he said, his voice light as if it were nothing. He then turned, seemingly looking for Colin Channing and the others. What? For me? I clutched the box, unsure of what to do. You don't like it? Alston asked, glancing over at me. Not that. But you're not taking it back, right? I thought for a moment. The heroine hadn't shown up, and somehow the necklace, meant for her, was now mine. Well, if it's given to me, there's no way I'm giving it back. It's worth 100 million. I'd be a fool to refuse. Hehehe. Alston responded, watching me hold onto the box like it was my lifeline, as if I feared he'd snatch it away. A little miser. Sister-in-law impressive. Indeed, Alston spent a fortune just to make you smile, Colin Channing and Elliot Drakes teased as they approached. Come on, the S Club is ready for us, Colin called out. Sister-in-law, you're coming too. No escaping, Elliot grinned. I looked at Alston, feeling torn. Me? At the S Club? I'm just an ordinary worker. It's just for fun, Alston said softly. All right then, if the boss says so. As the others piled into their cars, I leaned over and whispered into Alston's ear. Boss, should I keep up the act? Alston paused for a second, his expression unreadable. Do as you like, he replied. Got it, I answered confidently. This was my first time at the S Club, a paradise on earth, so lavish it left me speechless. There were only a few of us, yet they ordered rounds of white wine, red wine, and all sorts of spirits. It was dizzying to watch. The others kept shooting sly glances at Alston. Alston, shall we begin? Colin Channing asked with a mischievous smile. Let's eat first, Alston replied, unbuttoning his suit jacket, slipping it off to reveal a crisp white shirt and black vest underneath. He sat down, loosening his tie and undoing 2 buttons at his collar. With his usual coldness softened, he looked more dashing and approachable than ever. The food at S Club was top-notch, and I enjoyed myself thoroughly. Sister-in-law, eat up, Colin said, his words laced with a deeper meaning. Why did I have a bad feeling about this? Let's go, Alston said, elegantly wiping his mouth. As if on cue, the others filled their wine glasses to the brim. Come on, Alston. First one to get married, you owe us 3 drinks, Elliot Drakes laughed. I stared in shock. 3 drinks in one go? That would knock anyone out. Sensing my astonishment, Elliot laughed. Don't worry, sister-in-law. Alston can drink anyone in Sea City under the table, except for Mr. Brown from the wine industry. Then what about yesterday? I asked curiously. Yesterday? That was next door. Mr. Brown got Alston drunk. He rushed off for a meeting at noon and wrapped up the deal by the evening, Colin explained, grinning. Tonight in this room, we won't leave until Alston's calling us all Dad. So, he really was at a business meeting yesterday. When Leo said that, I thought he was making excuses. I had assumed Alston went to see the heroine. I was a bit surprised. What's the occasion today? Why all the drinking? I leaned closer to Alston and whispered. Maybe I got too close, because my hair accidentally brushed his ear, turning it red. They wanted to meet you, he said coolly, his tone unchanging. Right, we never had a wedding. In fact, we rushed to get our marriage certificate, and then Alston left for his business trip. Now he was finally back. But in this scenario, meeting his friends as his wife. Is this really my place? Still, since the boss said to go with the flow, I'll play my part. As the night wore on, Alston rubbed his temples, clearly feeling the effects of the drinks. By now, only Colin and Elliot remained standing. The others were already slumped over. It seemed like the perfect moment. Boss, leave this to me, I said, sensing my time to shine. Throughout the night, Alston had been shielding me from the alcohol, and honestly, watching him fend off drinks was a sight to behold. He did it with such grace. Can you even drink? Alston asked, his hand suddenly gripping my wrist. His touch was warm, and his breath, laced with a scent of red wine, brushed against my ear. The warmth sent shivers down my spine, and goosebumps prickled my skin. My heart skipped a beat. Snapping back to reality, I nodded confidently. I'll have those two down in no time. Alston seemed to smile. At least I thought he did. Or maybe it was just my imagination. The next thing I knew, everything was spinning. My vision blurred, but Colin and Elliot were still standing, their figures towering over me. Sister-in-law, looks like you're losing, Colin teased. Bam! I slapped my hand down on the table and staggered to my feet. Who's losing? Fill my glass. I grabbed the bottle and began pouring wine, most of it spilling onto the table. Alston frowned and steadied my hand. Stop, he said, his voice firm. I swatted his hand away. Don't tell me what to do, I slurred, staring up at him with a cocky grin, as if I was invincible. Then, as if to prove my point, I downed the glass in one go. By that point I was already out of it. Alston rubbed his temples again, looking down at me as I passed out, slumped over the table. With a sigh, he rolled up his sleeves. Fill the glasses, he said, raising an eyebrow at the two men across from him. The night didn't end until Colin and Elliot, slurring their words, called him Dad through their drunken haze. Outside, Leo Hill was already waiting. Alston grabbed my arm and led me out of the room. The ground seemed to sway beneath me, and everything spun. I reached back, grabbing Alston's hand. Wait! The road is alive. It's dangerous, I said seriously, clinging to him as if my life depended on it. I squatted down, wrapping my arms around his legs, crying, I don't want to die. Wah-ah. Don't go over there. The monsters will eat you. Alston let out a quiet chuckle, tying his jacket around my waist before hoisting me onto his back. Wow, your biceps are huge, I mumbled, barely able to recognize him, as I shamelessly ran my hand over his arm muscles, which bulged from carrying me. And your jawline. So sharp. I was captivated by the sharp angles of his face, so I reached out and touched it. His skin was surprisingly smooth. Alston Whiffin's face tightened in a cold expression, and he took a few deep breaths to calm himself. Moments later, I suddenly grabbed his head, messing up his hair as I buried my face in it, inhaling deeply. Wow! Your hair smells amazing. What shampoo do you use? Smack. Alston Whiffin had finally reached his limit, delivering a firm smack on my backside. Hannah Alliston, if you keep this up, I swear I'll throw you off my back. His voice was low, dangerous, and had a hint of mischief, completely different from the usual cold and distant man I knew. You hit me? I gasped, my eyes welling up in disbelief, tears threatening to spill. Alston seemed a bit taken aback by his own reaction, clenching his fist as if trying to restrain himself from losing more composure. Without another word, he marched forward with long strides. Knowing it wasn't wise to push my luck, I sulked quietly on his back, feeling pitiful but staying silent. All the way home, I mumbled groggily about getting hit. The alcohol was messing with me again, and Alston dropped me unceremoniously onto the sofa. His broad shoulders pressed into my stomach, making me feel a bit nauseous. Wah-ah-ah. I whimpered softly, feeling utterly wronged but too afraid to voice my anger. Alston knelt in front of me, rubbing his nose in frustration. Hannah, do you even know how ridiculous you get when you're drunk? You hit me. I swayed, unable to sit up straight, everything spinning around me. Alston sighed. catching me before I toppled over. His voice was irritated and strained. Fine. I'm sorry, okay? All right, hick, I guess I'll be magnanimous and forgive you, I said, pretending to be gracious. But, you have to give me a kiss, I added, grinning wickedly as I grabbed his face and planted a sloppy kiss on his cheek. Ah, success! I cheered, feeling proud of myself. Alston was too stunned to react, the veins in his neck and temple bulging in anger. Hannah! Aliston! Present! I saluted him with a goofy grin. Do you even know who I am? His voice was seething with rage, and he grabbed my face, though he stopped himself from using too much force. I leaned in closer, squinting at him, trying to focus on his deep, furious eyes. My alcohol-laden breath must have hit him because he shoved my face away with a disgusted frown. Whoa! You're Alston Whiffen! I gasped dramatically, as if making a huge discovery. Why haven't you gone to see your precious little wife? I hiccuped again, my words slurred, watching as Alston's face darkened even more, like he was contemplating strangling me. After hearing my words, he raised an eyebrow, a mischievous smirk curling on his lips. Tonight, he seemed like a different person, as if a mask had been torn away, revealing a side I hadn't seen before. This roguish version of Alston felt more real. Less distant and cold, more human. A tough, rebellious side. Oh no, I like this too much. Little wife? You mean you? Alston stood up, towering over me with a teasing look, his eyes narrowing in that devilish way. This feels like a scene from another world. I stared at him, wide-eyed and speechless. Has the boss been replaced? Possessed. I gasped, hugging my knees and curling into a ball on the sofa, eyeing him warily. Alston glanced at me with mild amusement before stepping forward, grabbing me by the arm and dragging me upstairs. I thrashed, yelling, "You're an old monster. You took over my boss's body to perform dark magic. I don't want to be eaten by you, you demon." I clung to the banister, refusing to go up the stairs. Alston's patience wore thin as the vein in his temple pulsed. Finally, he resorted to brute force, slinging me over his shoulder and carrying me up in one go. The next thing I knew, I was tossed onto the bed. Wait, how did I get to the bedroom so fast? You demon! You really used magic to teleport me here, I exclaimed, scrambling to sit up and pointing an accusing finger at him. But the room spun again, and I plopped right back down. Alston's eyes darkened dangerously as he leaned closer. I'll count to 3. Close your eyes and sleep. Or else. His voice was a low growl laced with menace. Or what? I'll eat you. The deep rumble of his voice made me swallow nervously, and without further hesitation, I dove under the covers, pulling them over my head. I'm asleep. Good night. I squeaked, shutting my eyes tight. Satisfied, Alston stood by the bed for a moment, watching as I finally settled into a quiet, even breathing rhythm. Once he was sure I was out cold, he left the room, leaving the door open slightly. He stayed downstairs, within earshot in case anything happened. Glancing at the small, uncomfortable-looking sofa, Alston frowned. Leo Hill needs to buy a mattress tomorrow, he muttered to himself. The next morning, I was awakened by the smell of stale alcohol and cigarette smoke clinging to me. Gross. I immediately rushed to the bathroom for a shower, my head clearing up as I scrubbed away the remnants of last night. Memories of my drunken antics came flooding back, especially how I shamelessly harassed the boss. Oh no, is Alston going to kill me? But then I remembered his behavior from last night. It was so different from his usual cold, disciplined self. The books always said Alston Whiffen had been strict and aloof since childhood. So how did he transform into this roguish version of himself last night? It was like he was that bad boy in school, the one who loiters at the gates with his shirt untucked, collecting protection fees. Wait, did I stumble upon the boss's deep, dark secret? I nervously crept downstairs. Alston was still asleep, his tall frame stretched awkwardly on the too-small sofa, his legs dangling off the edge. His brows were furrowed as if even in sleep, the discomfort was bothering him. The moment he heard me come down, he woke up, immediately alert. Morning, boss. Did you sleep well? I greeted him stiffly, trying to force a smile. Alston sat up, his normally immaculate hair tousled and soft, with a few strands sticking up, making him look far more approachable. His eyes, however, were filled with irritation from a poor night's sleep. He didn't even glance at me before heading to the downstairs bathroom. My heart sank. Once he finished freshening up, he walked upstairs again, his expression back to its usual neutral state. Wait, his clothes are still in our room. The sight of him in a freshly pressed suit first thing in the morning, it was like an attack on my senses. Sisters, you understand, right? I quickly whipped up my best mushroom soup, from a pre-packaged kit of course, and waited at the dining table, hoping to smooth things over. Boss, how about some breakfast before you go? I asked, trying to sound casual, as I rushed to pull out a chair for him. Alston raised an eyebrow but walked over and sat down. Still 5,000? He asked, his tone lazy. No, of course not. It's on the house, I said, hurriedly handing him a spoon. Have you learned your lesson? He asked, slowly eating, raising an eyebrow in that typical domineering fashion. Wow, his personality really changes from one day to the next. Alston Whiffen, you're no longer the cold, distant man I once knew. Yes, I've learned my lesson. I nodded eagerly. Would you like some fruit, boss? Alston gave a small nod, and I dashed into the kitchen to cut some fruit, arranging it nicely on a plate before packing it into a container for him to take. As Alston was leaving, I hesitated for a long time before finally blurting out, Boss, can we not dock my pay? Alston paused, glancing at me as he adjusted his tie, clearly in a good mood. We'll see how you behave. With that, he walked out the door. See how I behave? That's such a vague measure. What exactly does he want me to do? I spent half the day puzzling over it but couldn't come up with anything concrete. Ding dong. The doorbell rang. Who could it be this early in the afternoon? Hannah. Mom's here. Madame Sophie's energetic voice came from the other side of the door. Mom, what brings you here? I asked as I opened the door, taking in the sight of the ever-elegant Madame Sophie. Alston's father is on a business trip, and I didn't want to stay home alone, so I thought I'd come stay with you too for a few days. Behind her, a small entourage was unloading bed linens, luggage, and boxes, leaving me completely stunned. Madame Sophie pulled me down onto the sofa with her, while Uncle Ben coordinated the moving. Hannah, how have things been between you and Alston these past few days? Madame Sophie asked with a knowing smile. Mom, are you sure you're just here to visit? It's been all right, I replied awkwardly. Ah, young people. You should think about having a baby soon, Madame Sophie said warmly, holding my hand as she tried to coax me. The smile on my face froze. Just then, Alston finally returned home. Sweetheart, you're back, I exclaimed, relieved to be rescued by his arrival. I was filled with joy at escaping the conversation about babies. I darted over to Alston Whiffen, eagerly taking his suit jacket from him as if I hadn't just been cornered by Madame Sophie. Alston paused for a moment, surprised by how I addressed him, raising his eyebrows in mild curiosity. I blinked at him furiously, trying to signal my relief. Is something wrong with your eyes? Alston asked in his usual calm, detached voice. Alston, you're home, Madame Sophie called from the sofa, smiling as she waved. Alston's expression didn't change, but I could feel the stiffness in his posture. Even the powerful CEO wasn't immune to his mother's influence. When Alston found out Madame Sophie would be staying for a few days, his face noticeably froze for a moment. Later that night, Madame Sophie brought out a bowl of soup, insisting that Alston drink it for his health. I stood by enjoying the show, only to be rewarded with one of Alston's icy glares. Get some rest, Madame Sophie said after she watched us walk into our bedroom together. Feeling awkward, I glanced at Alston. There was only one bed, with one blanket. The small sofa that used to be in the room had been taken away earlier by Uncle Ben. It was clear that Madame Sophie knew our relationship wasn't as close as we pretended, and she had taken advantage of Alston's father being away on business to inspect things. Boss, looks like you'll have to share a bed with me tonight. Sorry for the inconvenience, I said with an exaggerated expression of sympathy, hoping to seize the opportunity before I was banished to the floor. I knew my place as a worker, who was going to sleep on the floor was obvious. There was a carpet, sure, but I wasn't about to self-torture. Alston glanced at me, not saying a word, before heading to the closet to grab some clean clothes and walking straight into the bathroom. Wait, he seems pretty familiar with the place? Oh right. Last time he got drunk, he stayed here. I nodded to myself, understanding. When Alston emerged from the bathroom, hair still damp, I had to admit. He looked stunning. Water droplets ran down his hair, tracing his neck before disappearing into his collar. Dressed in casual clothes, he looked less cold than usual. Broader shoulders, narrower waist. What a masterpiece of a man. Seen enough? Alston asked with an amused glint in his eyes as he towel-dried his hair, his expression neutral but teasing. Startled, I coughed awkwardly, grabbing my own pajamas and rushing into the bathroom. As I passed him, I noticed the scent coming off him. Was it the same body wash I used? My face turned red with embarrassment. I dawdled in the bathroom for as long as I could, hesitant to come out. The idea of spending the whole night in the same room as Alston made me nervous, my ears burning. Only when I was too exhausted to stay awake did I finally muster the courage to crack open the door. The room was dim, with only a small bedside lamp casting a warm glow. Alston was lying on his side of the bed, breathing evenly as though he was already fast asleep. I exhaled in relief, tiptoeing to the other side and slipping under the blanket. There was only one blanket, and it was entirely on my side. Feeling a bit guilty, I glanced over at Alston, who had nothing covering him. After a brief internal debate, I pulled half of the blanket over him. The room was at a perfect temperature, thanks to the air conditioning, but I couldn't shake the strange heat I felt whenever I got too close to Alston. His warmth seemed to radiate, making me jerk my hand back as if I'd been burned. Eventually, I drifted off to sleep, but Alston wasn't asleep after all. He slowly opened his eyes, glancing down at the blanket I had shared with him. His usually stoic lips twitched upward for a split second. As the night wore on, I, true to form, sprawled out in my sleep. One of my legs ended up draped across Alston's waist, and my arm wrapped around him like he was a giant pillow. Alston froze the moment he felt my leg on him, his entire body stiffening. A soft, warm sensation pressed against his back. The faint scent of my body wash lingered around him. Despite the air conditioning being set to a comfortable 23 degrees, Alston was breaking into a sweat, his handsome face lined with tension as he furrowed his brow. He wanted to push my leg off, but the smooth feel of my skin against his hand was like touching hot iron. He pulled his hand back, unable to bring himself to touch me again. The mix of tension and frustration boiled over when, in my sleep, I flung my leg up, and it landed on his face. In one swift move, Alston flipped me over, pinning me beneath him. Hannah Aliston. His hands gripped my face, waking me up immediately. Ha! What's going on? I muttered groggily, blinking up at his scowling face. You. What are you doing? Fully awake now, I stammered, feeling my heart race. Alston's eyes twinkled with something unspoken, and a rare smile tugged at the corners of his lips. What do you think I'm doing? He murmured, leaning closer, his breath tickling my ear. The heat from his ear pressed against my cheek, like a tiny furnace. Ding-ling-ling. The atmosphere broke as his phone rang. Alston's long fingers reached over me to grab his phone. As he leaned over, I couldn't help but notice the outline of his chest muscles under his pajamas. What a pity, ruined by a phone call. Do you want to continue? Alston's eyes were narrowed, teasing as he stood by the window, the mischievous glint back in his gaze. I froze, then shook my head furiously. I'll be there soon, he said into the phone, his expression suddenly serious. I have to go for a bit. Be good and go back to sleep. What? Was he talking to me like I was a child? Wait a minute. Today's date. I grabbed my phone. August 24th. Today was the day the heroine ran away from her abusive husband. Alston would go pick her up and take her to his other apartment. When he came back, he'd file for divorce with me, the villainess. I sat there, staring blankly at the bed, a dull ache in my chest. I pulled open the drawer beside the bed and took out the necklace. Images of Alston flashed through my mind, sometimes cold and distant, sometimes playful and roguelike. Shaking my head, I slapped myself lightly. Hannah Aliston. Snap out of it. I turned the air conditioner down to 16 degrees, hoping the cold would help clear my mind. Focus. 5 million a month. Who needs a man when you've got that? I repeated to myself, Alston Whiffen belongs to the heroine. Alston Whiffen belongs to the heroine. Alston Whiffen belongs to the heroine. Important things are said 3 times. Now, close your eyes and sleep. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't sleep all night. Hannah, you really should take care of yourself, Madame Sophie commented the next morning, seeing my dark circles as I dragged myself downstairs for breakfast. She smiled knowingly, her expression somewhere between surprise and amusement. "Good morning, Mom," I said, trying to force a smile despite my exhaustion. Even after breakfast, my head was still spinning. "Hannah, go upstairs and rest. Don't overwork yourself. I'll make some soup to help you recover," Madam Sophie said, urging me to get more sleep. I sluggishly wandered back upstairs, my head pounding, and soon collapsed into a deep sleep. "Hannah, I'm heading out with my friends tonight." I vaguely heard Madam Sophie's voice, responding with a mumbled before sinking back into darkness. After what felt like hours, I heard someone calling my name. "Hannah." The voice was low and raspy. Was that Alston Whiffen? Had he come back to finalize the divorce? A dull, sour ache spread in my chest. I forced my eyes open, vision blurry. Alston's hand brushed against my forehead. I weakly pushed his hand away, suddenly feeling incredibly hurt. "Just go to her already. Don't bother with me. Once I'm better we'll get divorced," I mumbled, my voice trembling with both heat and frustration. My body was burning, my face flushed, and I felt pitifully small. Something in my words must have triggered Alston, because his face darkened, and I could see the unmistakable anger flashing in his eyes. He pinched my cheek hard, waking me up even more. "You want a divorce?" His tone was cold, barely containing his fury, a dangerous edge in every word. "You're yelling at me?" I pouted, my voice filled with grievance. Sick people are like children, and I felt especially wronged at that moment, my eyes wide as I stared at him accusingly. Alston's frown deepened as he tucked the blanket around me. His voice was stiff and cold. "I'm not. You are. You are. Wah!" I started crying, my feverish state amplifying my emotions. Before I could continue my outburst, Alston shoved medicine into my mouth, cutting me off mid-cry. "Take your medicine, then you can complain all you want." He handed me a glass of water, his voice indifferent. I obediently drank the water, though I still looked at him like he was the biggest villain on earth. "What's gotten into you?" Alston asked, taking the empty glass from me and pressing a cold fever patch onto my forehead. "You don't need to be so nice to me. I'll agree to the divorce, I won't cling," I muttered sadly, lowering my head, my tears barely held in. Why did he have to be so irresistible? "Are you really not going to let this go?" Alston's voice dropped even colder, his patience visibly wearing thin as he laced his fingers together, the veins on his hands bulging slightly with tension. His expression was unreadable, but I knew he was reaching his breaking point. "I already said I'd agree to the divorce. What are you so angry about?" I snapped back, irritated. "Who said I want a divorce?" Alston Whiffen grabbed my wrist and lifted it gently, and as I looked into his eyes, tears of frustration began to spill, one after another, landing on his hand. For a moment, the usually composed Alston looked completely out of sorts, panicked even. "Hey, don't cry, I'm sorry. He hurriedly reached for a tissue and clumsily wiped my tears, his voice laced with a hint of desperation. When he saw me calming down, he gave my cheek a gentle, playful pinch, his expression one of exasperated helplessness. With a soft sigh as though giving up on the situation, he muttered, "What am I going to do with you?" "I know you like Florence Tomlin," I said, my voice dropping. "I won't stand in your way." I lowered my head, feeling utterly defeated. So this was what heartbreak felt like. Not even money could soothe the pain, unless maybe it was bumped up to 10 million, then it might take the edge off. "Florence Tomlin?" Alston's voice was confused, his face a blank slate. I stared at him, stunned. He looked genuinely baffled, like he had no idea who I was talking about. "You don't know her? You went to see her last night," I blurted, in disbelief. This couldn't be real. After all the love story drama between them that could fill thousands of chapters, he was telling me he didn't even know her? "Who told you that nonsense?" Alston frowned, his tone growing impatient. "Last night, the business partner I was working with had to leave the country unexpectedly, so I met with him to discuss the deal." "Florence? I don't even know who that is." His casual, dismissive tone turned sharp and irritated as he added, "I have no idea who Florence Tomlin is." I stood there, utterly speechless. "You didn't date her in college?" I asked, dumbfounded. "Where did you hear that?" Alston's brow furrowed, his voice thick with displeasure. Well, just, gossip, I stammered awkwardly. How could I possibly explain to him that he existed in a book, and I had somehow read through his entire past? Don't listen to gossip. If you want to know something, ask me, Alston said, his bad boy attitude fading into something more genuine as he ruffled my hair gently, almost as if I were a puppy. Got it, I mumbled, feeling flustered. I wanted to brush off the whole thing and go back to sleep. I'm tired now, good night. You little brat, Alston muttered, glancing at me with a smirk before leaving the room, carrying his water cup. The frustration and sadness I'd been feeling vanished just as quickly as it came. All that was left was confusion. Had I been reading the wrong book? I lay there, staring blankly at the ceiling. The day Alston walked out during dinner with his family wasn't to see the heroine, but to meet with a business partner. At the auction, neither the heroine nor the abusive husband showed up. And last night, Alston didn't visit the heroine at all. As I thought it over, the medicine I had taken earlier started kicking in, and I slowly drifted off to sleep. Sometime later, I felt someone gently replace the fever patch on my forehead and tuck the blanket around me. When I opened my eyes again. Wait, what? I was back home? My desk lamp was on, and my computer screen was lit up, still on the page where I'd been reading the final chapter before I got pulled into the story. I pinched myself, but there was no pain. Was I still dreaming? This dream was way too real. I walked over to the computer, scrolling through the chapters. There were still a few extra epilogues to read. The title caught my eye. After Marriage Comes Love, the extra chapters. There were only a few chapters, and the description said it was a story set in an alternate universe where Alston Whiffen and Hannah Alliston fell in love after marriage. In this version, Alston Whiffen wasn't the disciplined, perfect child from the main story. Instead, he was rebellious. He smoked, drank, got into fights, and even had a scar on his ribcage from a high school brawl. He'd only matured after being sent to the army for 2 years. No wonder Colin Channing and Elliot Drake still called him Alston with such respect. They had been his underlings in high school, back when he'd fought his way to the top. A scar on his ribcage? I hadn't dared to look closely when I took off his shirt the last time he got drunk. But then the author stopped writing, cutting off the story right before Alston and Hannah got their marriage certificate. Which was the day I had entered this story. Great. Everyone else gets to live in the main story, and I end up in an unfinished extra. My vision blurred, and I fainted. Hannah Alliston, wake up and eat something before you go back to sleep. I heard a voice calling me out of the darkness. Alston Whiffen's face slowly came into view, holding a bowl of porridge. I peeked into the bowl, white with specks of black, and kind of burnt looking. I swallowed nervously and glanced at Alston. Are you sure about this? I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck, a hint of embarrassment flashing in his eyes, though his face remained cold. If you don't want it, don't drink it, he snapped, turning on his heel and leaving before I could respond. Wait. Did he make that himself? In that case, I'll just let it slide. Before long, Alston returned, his face still as cold as ever. Here, drink this instead. This time, it was a perfect bowl of congee, clearly from somewhere fancy. The moment I tasted it, my eyes practically lit up with joy. The simple white porridge tasted so good it made me feel warm and fuzzy inside. As I enjoyed it, I noticed Alston's expression growing darker and darker. Before I could finish, he yanked the bowl from my hands. But I'm not full yet, I complained, holding my spoon and staring at him expectantly. Is it really that good? Alston asked, his tone cold as he glared at me. I guessed he must have been comparing the amazing porridge I was devouring to his earlier attempt. His frustration grew as he thought about it. After a moment, he handed the bowl back to me with a sigh. I finished it off happily, feeling completely satisfied. Then, out of nowhere, I remembered Alston's scar. I leaped off the bed and ran downstairs. In the kitchen, Alston was fumbling around with the dishwasher, clearly struggling. Alston Whiffen! I shouted from across the room, sprinting towards him. I must have run too fast because by the time I reached him, my face was flushed. Alston blinked at me, his expression softening as he awkwardly shifted his gaze away. He pressed a hand to my forehead, trying to keep some distance. What is it? He asked, his face still impassive. Do you mind if I take a look at those incredible abs of yours? I asked, my eyes full of hope. No, you not. Alston's ears turned bright red as he leaned in close, emphasizing each word. I knew he wouldn't agree, so I acted fast and lifted his shirt before he could stop me. There it was, a faint scar on the right side of his ribcage. Is this what you wanted to see so badly? Alston grabbed my wrist and in one swift motion, pinned me against the kitchen counter. He tilted his head, locking eyes with me, his voice low as he spoke softly. I blinked up at him, unable to look away, my heart racing with excitement. So, in this story, there's no one else. Just me and Alston Whiffen. But before I could process it, Alston let go of my wrist and turned away. He seemed to hesitate, his jaw tightening as though holding something back. Then, without warning, he lifted me off the ground and practically dumped me onto the sofa. Put your shoes on, he ordered, then disappeared upstairs to fetch them. What? I sat there in stunned silence. That intense moment, and now all I get is a reminder to wear shoes? If I hadn't seen that Alston's face was bright red and he was walking awkwardly, I would have thought I imagined the whole thing. By the time Alston came back downstairs, I was almost falling asleep on the sofa. Seeing me lying there, he sighed and scooped me up into his arms. I pretended to sleep, enjoying being carried like a princess. He carefully laid me on the bed and tucked me in, his movements gentle. Then, just as I was about to drift off, I felt a warm sensation on my forehead, a kiss. It was quick but enough to make my heart flutter. Hannah. His voice was low and gravelly, followed by a soft chuckle. It was enough to drive anyone mad. I snapped my eyes open, grabbing his hand before he could pull away. Alston froze, caught off guard, his face showing a rare moment of panic. You called my name so sweetly, I teased, grinning up at him. Call it again? He turned his head, refusing to meet my gaze. Hubby, I blurted out instinctively, and instantly, both Alston and I froze in shock. I let go of his hand, my face heating up so fast I thought I might pass out. Sneaking a glance at him, I saw Alston standing there, completely stunned. Did you just short-circuit? I waved my hand in front of his face, trying to break the awkward silence. This time it's different, Alston said quietly, his eyes shining with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. If you really like me, I wouldn't mind making this real, he said, pulling my hand to his, clearly embarrassed but still managing to look at me with a shy grin. I never realized before that the aloof CEO could also be so bashful. I couldn't help but want to tease him a little. I'll think about it, I said playfully. What's there to think about? Do you have someone else outside? Alston's grip on my hand tightened instantly. His brows furrowed, and his eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and fear. I had a feeling that if I nodded, he might just break my hand. Hey, easy. I frowned, trying to shake his grip. Realizing he was hurting me, Alston quickly let go, though his hand lingered, now gently massaging the spot he had just squeezed. Despite his calm face, his whole body radiated frustration. I couldn't help but laugh. No, I don't have anyone else, all right? Alston raised an eyebrow, satisfied, and gave a soft grunt of approval. But even that wasn't enough for him. He crawled into bed, pulling me into his arms as if to claim his territory. He kissed my forehead again, this time with open confidence. Go to sleep. I'll stay here and make sure you do, he said, his voice laced with amusement he couldn't quite hide. Alston held me tightly, his strong arms not giving me an inch of space to move. But with my head resting on his chest, I was perfectly content, so I let him hold me as long as he wanted. After I had fallen into a deep sleep, Alston leaned down and kissed me again. This time, his lips brushed against mine, warm and lingering. Hannah. Extra. Alston Whiffen had never thought he'd get married. He had plenty of people around him, but none of them ever caught his eye. When the time came, his family arranged for him to take a wife. He didn't want to, but he didn't fight it either. After all, when he was younger, he had spent his days getting into fights and drinking, almost driving his parents to the brink. So now, going along with their wishes didn't seem like a big deal. On the first day of their marriage, he made an agreement with his new wife. He'd give her $5 million every month, and in return, she had to act the part of a loving wife in front of his parents. The girl, a little money-hungry thing, had nodded so hard at the mention of $5 million that her head nearly blurred. When he returned from a business trip, he took her back to his family for dinner. He had grown used to women with heavy makeup, so her fresh, simple look was a rare sight. In almost 30 years, no woman had ever gotten close to him. But this little girl wasn't afraid. She clung to his arm and leaned in to whisper, "Husband," into his ear. Alston had stiffened immediately, his expression growing even colder, but really, he was just hiding his embarrassment. That night, he got drunk and was brought home by Leo Hill to their shared house. When he woke up, instead of the usual stench of alcohol, he was surrounded by the clean scent of fresh sheets. The blanket beneath him was soft, still carrying a pleasant fragrance. He vaguely remembered throwing up on her the night before and felt a twinge of regret and awkwardness. Alston Whiffen had been drinking since middle school, but he had never been that messy before. As he squeezed the soft blanket in his hands, he found himself wondering if her face was as soft as it looked. When he saw her sleeping downstairs on the small sofa, nearly falling off, something in him softened. Before leaving, he caught sight of her sitting at the dining table with a bowl of noodles. He had intended to walk out the door, but his feet veered toward the table, and he sat down instead. The noodles tasted pretty good. $5,000, cash or transfer? Hearing that, Alston almost choked on his food. He nearly laughed but held it in. Such a little money grubber. He didn't even know why he had spent so much money on that diamond necklace for her. But the way her eyes had lit up made his heart soften. Just a little. He suddenly had the urge to pinch her cheek. That night, she had stood in front of him with no fear, declaring that she would outdrink Colin Channing and Elliot Drakes. Seeing her so full of enthusiasm, Alston had let her go ahead with it. After all, he was there to back her up. As expected, she was small, and her alcohol tolerance was even smaller. But it didn't matter. He had taken care of it for her. It was the first time Alston had ever carried someone on his back, let alone a woman. She was soft and small, clinging to him like a little bundle. She was making quite a fuss, and when she pushed him too far, Alston swatted her on the backside. The mischievous streak from his youth, usually buried deep, resurfaced for the first time in years. Once the first time happened, it didn't take long for a second. It didn't take much for her to realize that Alston Whiffen wasn't the cold, distant man everyone thought he was. Falling in love with her felt as natural as breathing. Some people come into your life, and you just know that they're the one. No one else will do. It felt like he had spent half of his life in solitude, just waiting for her. The end. Thanks for stopping by. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos.